I'm excited. We're starting a new quarter tonight. This is the fall quarter. Got a new class. This is called Bible Biographies. We're going to talk about some of the lesser known, perhaps lesser talked about folks in the Bible and see what lessons we can learn from them. The first one we'll talk about tonight is Uriah the Hittite. By the way, if you have any, if you are thinking of any or have thought of any or happen to think of any folks in the Bible who are lesser knowns, folks we don't talk about much, but you would like to hear something on them, write it down on a piece of paper and give it to me. Don't just tell me, because I'm a husband and I won't remember. And you'll go, remember that, what I told you? And I'll go, what? Huh? I screw my face up like this. That always seems to help. I don't know why. But that's just natural. But that's what this class is. And we'll do some reading to start with, and then we'll go through our worksheet. Ideally, we would cover one biography every class period, but that's not any kind of a standing rule. We've got almost 2 pages worth of notes here, and if we do the reading, we're just going to play this as it comes. If it takes us 2 weeks to get through Uriah, then that's what we're going to do. So, see if there was anything else I wanted. Oh yes, this is the beginning of a quarter. As I try to remind everybody, if you decide you want to try another class next Wednesday, that will not hurt my feelings. I'm not taking names to see who's in here and then comparing it with next week's list. It's, oh, you're not in here. What's wrong with you? You go into another class, and you find a place where you'll get the feeding that you think you need. And why did I not bring my glasses? I guess I'll use these. These little things are cool. These are called thin optics. I bought them online. I think Don Furch had a pair, and I saw them, and I said, I got to have some of those. I lusted after his thin optics. Right there. Do I look older when I put these on? Don't answer that. Yeah, really. All right, I need 5 readers. 5 readers. Let's not waste time. Let's get going. I need 5 readers. All right, Carolyn, you're one. Verses 1 through 5. I need a reader for 6. 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12 is where we are. I'm sorry, 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12. Carolyn, you have 2 Samuel 11, 1 through 5. Who will take 6 through 13? All right, Titus, 6 through 13, 14 to 21. Who will read 14 to 21? All right, Ron. Ron is well capable of reading. He's a very literate guy. Verses 22, chapter 11, 22 to 27. Who will take that? All right, Bobby. And then we'll finish up the first 9 verses of chapter 12. Who will read the first 9 verses of 2 Samuel chapter 12? All right, Rick, or Rich. Excellent. Let's go. Let's read it.
And it came to pass after the year was expired at the time when kings go forth to battle that David sent Joab and his servants. I always do that.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, I just hit it on the wrong side.
Oh, yeah.
And that David, and it came to pass in an evening tide that David rose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman washing herself, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. And David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, is not this Bathsheba the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent messengers and took her, and she came in unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanliness, and she returned into her own house. And the woman conceived and sent and told David and said, I am with child.
So David sent this word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants and did not go down to his house. David was told, Uriah did not go home. So he asked Uriah, haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. Then David said to him, Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening Uriah went out to sleep on his mat amongst his master's servants. He did not go home.
In the morning it happened that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by hand to Uriah. And he wrote in the letter saying, Set Uriah at the forefront of the hottest battle and retreat from him, that he may be struck down and die. So it was, while Joab besieged the city, that he assigned Uriah to a place where he knew there were valiant men. Then the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the people of the servants of David fell, and Uriah the Hittite died also. Then Joab sent and told David all the things concerning the war, and charged the messenger, saying, When you have finished telling the matters of the war to the king, if this happens that the king's wrath rises, and he says to you, Why did you approach so near to the city when you fought? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who struck Amalek, the son of Jerusalem? It was not a woman who cast a piece of a millstone on him from the wall, so that he died in Thebez. Why did you go near the wall? Then you shall say, Your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So the messenger went and came and told David that Joab had sent him. And the messenger said to David, Surely the men prevailed against us and came out to us in the field. Then we drove them back as far as the entrance of the gate.
The archers shot from the wall at your servants. And some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Then David said to the messenger, Thus you shall say to Joab, Do not let this thing displease you, for the sword devours one as well as another. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it. So encouraged him. When the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah her husband was dead, she mourned for her husband. But when the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord.
The Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, There were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over, because he did such a thing and had no pity. Then Nathan said to David, You are the man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you, and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all Israel and Judah, and if all of this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him and the sword of the Ammonites.
All right. Thank you all for reading. Great job tonight. 2 side notes before we start talking about Uriah. These are just so, to me, they're very valuable. I'd like to pass them on to you as we start tonight. The first side note is the Hittites. There was a time when the Bible was ridiculed as a foolish book because people said there were no such people as the Hittites. There were no archaeological references, there were no discoveries as yet to verify the existence of the Hittite people, and so people would say the Bible's a silly book, it doesn't have any reliability at all, because it talks about the Hittites, all these different places, and there never were any Hittites. And then archaeology unearthed the huge, massive empire of the Hittites. And they've been finding more and more and more evidence of the Hittite people. They were huge. They went all over Turkey, what's now present-day Turkey. So the Hittites were a great people, and I wanted you to be aware of that was one of the reasons people ridiculed the Bible, is because they used to say there weren't any Hittites, and and lo and behold, boom, all right, there were Hittites, and archaeology confirms that. The second side note is, can you imagine a darker day in Israel when the one man who is said to be, what is David said to be? Man after God's own heart, commits adultery, lies to cover it up, is willing to deceive a man into thinking that his child belongs to him, that David's child belongs to Uriah, then involves his cabinet members, so to speak, in a murder plot. It's just horrible. But to me, the bright spot is when God shows us, here's my best man. Here's a guy who was after my own heart. Look what he did. Marty, there's hope for you. Does that resonate with you like it resonates with me? Because I look at myself and I think, okay, I'm a pretty rotten guy in a lot of ways, but I've not done what David did, and David was a man after God's own heart. There was room for David to repent. God didn't wipe him out. As a matter of fact, who came next in David's lineage? Solomon. Whose mom was Solomon, or who was Solomon's mom? Bathsheba. So God is willing to go ahead with the messes we make in our lives as long as we're willing to repent and come back. That's such a huge lesson to me. I carry that with me every day. So those two asides are now aside. I hope you've got them mentally pegged up here, and if they resonate with you like they have with me, you got them. Number one, though he was a blank and a blank. Okay, yes. Listen to what Ron said. He's wrong, but he said soldier and a husband. That's exactly right. He was a soldier and a husband. But the point I want to make here is he was a Hittite, which means a foreigner, and in terms of the Torah, a stranger. He was a foreigner and a stranger. He was not Jewish. He was not born of the lineage of Abraham. He was a foreigner and he was a stranger. And though, well, there's nothing in the text that leads me to think he is a mercenary, because you can read that in there, and I'm sure he was taking pay for what he was doing. But if we go through this, we find out he was more than just a mercenary. Mercenaries are simply soldiers for hire. He was more than that, and I think the text bears this out. He associated himself with the people of God, the people who were once enemies of Israel, because the Hittites were Israel's enemies. Yes, he was. Who was Cornelius in the New Testament? He was the first Gentile convert. He was the commander of the Italian cohort. I guess they ate a lot of lasagna and pizza. That would have been a great bunch to be part of, man. But that's who Cornelius was, and we've got some parallels here. He left the Hittites to align himself with Israel. And why he did that, we don't know. We just know that he did. So here's the lesson that I put down. Those who would follow Christ must first leave the world to do so. That's you and me. If we're going to be disciples of Jesus Christ, we've got to leave the world. 2 Corinthians 6:17. Anybody got that? See what we got here. And that's one passage. Paul writes this, and he's quoting the old covenant. It says, therefore come out from their midst and be separate, says the Lord, and do not touch what is unclean, and I will welcome you. He had just said up in verse 14, do not be bound together with unbelievers. Is he talking about marriage there? I don't think he's talking about marriage. Because if he's saying do not be bound, that means if you are bound to a husband or wife that's not a believer, what do you have to do? You got to get unbound. And there are several other passages that teach, no, don't do that. Don't get a divorce because of your religious beliefs conflicting with your husband's or your wife's religious beliefs. What he's saying is, don't be in spiritual associations with people who are of different faiths. If they don't believe what you believe, then you need to separate yourselves from them. What had he asked earlier here? Yes.
Okay. You're probably right. I'm in the wrong chapter. Never mind.
What are we looking at? Oh, 2 Corinthians. I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, it all seems to fall into place. That's one of the things. I get just a little panicked when I'm preaching, and I'll go, let's turn over this passage, and I go to that passage, and it's not at all what I thought it was going to be, or I've marked the wrong text or something, and it's like, whoa. And then you can't think of anything. You can't even think of your middle name when that happens to you. So, are there other passages that teach the same thing? See, the last question under the lesson there is, can you think of other passages that teach the same thing? Teach what? Come out of the world. Be separate. Stop and think about it.
One in Mark was an 8, pick up your cross and follow me.
Yes.
Go into the world.
Very good. What, if you're in Jerusalem in the first century and you look out your window and see some guy carrying a cross, what do you know about that guy? He's as good as dead. He's as good as dead. And that's what Jesus was talking about. Take up your cross, take up your hangman's noose. You're going to die to yourself, die to the world. That's the way Paul put it in Romans chapter 6. Dead to sin. All right. Number 2. If we want to come back and discuss that further, we sure can, but let's go to number 2 for now. Uriah used his abilities for blank kingdom. God's kingdom. Now we realize David was a king, but who made David king? God made him king. He was anointed of God. That's exactly why David would not ever lay a hand on Saul. And at least 3 times he made the point, I will not lay a hand on Saul, even though he's trying to kill me, because he is the Lord's anointed. He knew that, he understood the idea, the depth, the meaning that God anointed Saul to be king, and he did not consider himself having the right to take Saul out. And so now David has been anointed to be king in Saul's place, and he is in fact king, and Uriah is serving in his kingdom. And he wasn't just a soldier, Uriah. He was a valiant soldier. And when you look at 2 Samuel 23, just a few chapters on down the road here in 2 Samuel, you'll see that Uriah is listed as one of David's mighty, valiant men. Not every guy got in that list, but Uriah did. And Jesus teaches us to let our light shine, to do good works. So, lesson on number 2. We're created in Christ Jesus specifically for good works. It's an interesting question. Are we saved by our works, or do we do good works because we're saved? And the answer to that is yes. Yes. When we're talking about works, are we talking about works of merit? Is there anything in the Bible that talks about works making us more worthy than? Our works are all about our faith. If we have faith, then our works will be an outgrowth of that faith. And when you see somebody working, you know they've got at least enough faith to do whatever it is they're doing. Works come out of faith, and that's the way it's supposed to work. Interesting choice of words, I guess. Ephesians 2:10, let's go there. Not too far from 2 Corinthians. That's Ephesians, Billy, not Hosea. All right. Just want to make sure you got that one covered.
We are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus. Good works which God prepared before that he should walk in them.
What's workmanship? When it says we're his workmanship. He made us. He put us together. We've got a design that's been thought out ahead of time and built into us. Isn't your body an amazing thing? And I don't care what you think you look like. Your body's doing amazing stuff right now as we speak. Everything that you ate in the last several hours is being processed by your body and turned into you. All the nutrients are being used to supply you with energy and renewed cells. Your body has a system of sloughing off all the dead stuff that's already worn out. It's being flushed away through all kinds of systems in your body, and you are being renewed as a human being as we speak. The inner man is the same, only on a much higher level. And so when we read about us being God's workmanship, he's designed us for this purpose. And what is the purpose according to verse 10, Ephesians 2:10? He wants us to do good works. This is why God made us. And we are the same. If you build something, you've got a purpose for it. Even if it's just one of those crazy little macrame things that you knit together, what are you going to do with that? You're going to hang it on the wall and enjoy it. Or you're going to put it in the attic and throw it away 20 years later. Hopefully it's not that. But everything you make, everything you create, you put yourself into it, even if it's just a meal, and you've got an intention for that thing you create. And that's the same with us. Uriah had abilities, and he surrendered his abilities up to the kingdom of God. He was a soldier in David's army, and he was a valiant soldier. And we need to be soldiers in the army of the Lord. All right. Number 3, Uriah was not ruled by his
Passion or fleshly desire.
flesh is what I would put there. He was not ruled by his flesh. Passion would also be good. How do we know that? We had a beautiful wife.
Found his wife, he stayed with his men.
Right. He was away from the field. He'd been pulled out of battle. He didn't decide to leave the field of battle. He was called out of the field of battle. And I wondered, because I was in the military, and I had to wonder to myself, what did Uriah think was going on when he was pulled out and told, you need to report to the king? Whoa, that's kind of scary. Could have been, but if he had been the messenger before, that probably wouldn't have been weird. But it's highly unlikely that a valiant man like this would have been the one called away from battle on previous occasions. There's no indication that he ever was. So at any rate, he was called to come into town, and he didn't go home. He didn't go home. Where'd he stay? Stayed out on a porch with the king's servants. Didn't go home to his wife. He had a beautiful wife, but when called back to Jerusalem, did not go into her out of respect for his fellow soldiers in the field. We're going to talk about that in another point, but he didn't allow his flesh to rule him. The lesson: Jesus teaches us to walk according to the Spirit of God so that we will not fulfill the desires of the flesh. Look at Galatians 5. Somewhere he got some kind of teaching, because later on we're going to find out that he reveres the ark of God. He's got character, he's got honor, he's got integrity, he's got these things. And I don't know about you, but when I think about cultures that aren't Bible-oriented cultures, then I wonder if there's a void there with regard to character and honor. But the more you read about individuals in history who have shined brightly, it's Romans chapter 2. What does Romans chapter 2 tell us about the Gentiles who do not have the law? Romans chapter 2 talks about those who by nature, in other words, it's only natural to do the things that are right. What does every human culture have that is an indication that we come from a creator God? One of the things is, I'm sorry? Okay, we all seek something to worship. Morality, yes, that's what we're getting at here, a sense of morality. Now, different cultures might have different moralities, but everybody has this sense that some things are right and some things are wrong. And even though a culture's morality might be different from another culture's morality, we all have this sense that some things are right and some things are wrong. If there is no God, if we simply came into existence on our own, then there should be no sense of right and wrong. It's only what I want to do and what you want to do, and if I'm stronger than you, then I'm going to force my will on you. But if there's right and wrong involved, we know that doesn't go, that doesn't fly. Don? Exactly. Above and beyond. Well, but why did he get drunk? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you're in there with the king and the king says, here, have another beer. Okay, you're going to have another beer. Yeah. But he was not, I know exactly what your point is, and it flows with everything that Samuel is reporting to us about Uriah. It tells us this is a man who's not only a valiant soldier, he's a man of high character. He's got honor. He's got integrity. He's got respect for the king. He's got respect for his fellow soldiers out in the field. And he's going above and beyond the call of duty. I mean, you stop. He did. Well, at least that's. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Diane says he'd probably knew he'd get in trouble if he went home to his wife drunk. But you see, remember in the text, if we read it carefully, when did David get him drunk or try to? When he found out, okay, he's not going to his wife straight off. I got to get this guy drunk. I got to change his pattern of judgment so he'll think, oh, that's okay. I'll go and sleep with my wife. Yeah. It's just so, do you see the irony? Here is David, a man after God's own heart, whom God has made king of Israel, and he's a Jew's Jew, so to speak, and he's trying to get this Gentile, heathen, pagan convert to do all the things opposite of what is right. I don't think about that much. I think about, the adultery and the lying and the murder, but I don't think about, wow, what's he trying to do with Uriah here? There's just so much that, Another lesson is, how could David see so clearly when Nathan came in and said, here were these two guys with sheep? Right.
There's two situations right there that you definitely don't want to be in. If you've ever been in a battle, you might be in the fierce part of the battle, but you definitely won't back up in the battle.
Right.
He told the men to withdraw from him to kill him.
Right.
So we're going to have this guy murdered. He hasn't done nothing but been faithful to God and said, I can't go into my wife, I've done this, I've done that, I've done well, and yet the king is trying to get him killed.
Yeah. Now here's another, I'll just throw this out there. I shouldn't stop throwing things in there. I should just go on with my lesson plan here. But did God let it happen? God let it happen. God could have said, no, Uriah's a good guy. We're not going to get him killed. David, you're going to have to come up with another plan. He could have stopped David in his tracks right then at that point before Uriah died, but God didn't do that. It's interesting how this works out. Carolyn?
I wonder why that the guys that killed him had so much less morality than he did.
Well, I don't think it was anything about morality on their part. They were under command, and they simply did what they were commanded to do, and they didn't kill him. They just withdrew from him. Well, we don't even know that happened, because it doesn't say that that's exactly how he died. That's David's plan, which is a pretty heinous plan to come up with. Take this guy into the heat of battle and then pull away from him, let him get killed by the enemy.
Withdraw from him so that he may be struck down and
Right. Now, that was his plan. But they simply went into battle, and the archers shot from the wall, and Uriah was among those killed. He wasn't the only one killed, apparently, because it doesn't sound like he was the only one, but he was among those who were killed. So. Absolutely. Because he could have told David at any time, what are you doing? This is wrong. What are you? Yeah. Well, but.
You gotta have the whole story in the military. They don't give you the whole story. To them, he could have been a spy. Go back and
Well, there's all kinds of suppositions we could go into, but what we know is in the text that he was put in the thick of battle and the enemy archers killed him, and that was what David wanted. That's what David, and Joab knew. He told the guy, hey, when you go back and you report to David, if David gets upset about our losses today, make sure the last thing you tell him if he gets upset is what? Uriah got killed, and then he'll be happy. That'll appease him. Oh yeah, absolutely. No question about that. So. Right. Joab, don't you feel bad about this? And I'd be going, what do you mean? He's one of my best guys, and you had me murder him. It's like, I would, well, I'd like to think I would, but, yes.
Do you think it was David's fearful and that's what drove his decisions?
Fearful?
Yes.
In what way?
Well, he just committed adultery.
Mm-hmm.
He found out exactly. He's a man after God's own heart, and he is the leader, and here he is committing the sin. If I get found out,
You see what a good question that is? Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I know sometimes when we get scared, it's just whatever's gonna fix it. Duct tape, glue, whatever it takes to patch that hole and get it taken care of.
Even if it takes killing some guy. Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Yeah, well, that was what the law said. And even when it all came out, did they stone David? They didn't stone David. Very interesting.
It's very similar to when you tell a lie, you have to tell 10 or 12 other ones to cover what you got. Well, he had already committed adultery,
Right?
and he knew he was going to get caught, so what did he do? You tell another lie. So instead, he just said, well, we'll see what we can do about covering this up. And that was all it was David trying to cover up one transgression with another.
Yeah. And how sordid is it? Okay, I got her pregnant. How can I work it out so that Uriah will think this baby's his? And then you're laying that on her, because now she has to go through her life, theoretically, convincing her husband that this baby's his. It's like, David. But that's the deal. The fear factor, Titus, is an excellent point to bring up, because if he hadn't done that in the first place, would there be anything to be afraid of? Wouldn't. Yeah, send Bathsheba to the front. Yeah, take a message up there to your husband. Here, have some sandwiches. Carry those up into battle. Joab, here's what I want you to do. Man. Criminal mind over here coming up with alternate plans. Yeah, kill them all. Let the Lord sort them out. It used to be you'd go to gun shows and you'd see T-shirts with that on there. It was back during the days of Vietnam vets and all that. Happiness is a confirmed kill. All kinds of interesting things on T-shirts. Yeah, that's it. All right, number 4. Uriah blanked God in his behavior. He honored God. He honored God in his behavior. What did he say? Not just the soldiers were out in the field. What else was out in the field? The ark. The Lord's ark is, how can I go in and have pleasure with my wife while the ark of the Lord is in the field of battle? And he's a Hittite. You talk about somebody who has not only enlisted himself bodily in the army of God, but he has enlisted himself mentally and spiritually, it appears to me, in following after Yahweh God.
Forward, that God would represent God going forward for us.
Right.
When they followed the ark out there, when they didn't take the ark or call upon God to do what they need to do, they ended up losing the battle. So here's the ark out there with them. He knows that it represents God with us. He's out there fighting for us. So he's doing all that he can. And yet that would puzzle me too, but when I was called back to see the king, when I'm out there with the ark trying to do what's right.
Well, you're asking me to go back?
You realize it never did tell you who they was fighting, but that they were fighting.
It's springtime, time to go to war. That's how the chapter starts.
That's what they did in the springtime.
Yeah.
Before harvest, come harvest time, everybody went and harvested. In the springtime, that's when you go kill somebody.
Yeah, let's go. Springtime. Nothing like love and romance and war all going together right there in the spring. Flowers blooming, swords blazing. Oh, come on, quit. We never did look at Galatians 5. We were there on point 3, and we went completely away from that. But let's go back and visit that at least briefly before our class ends. Uriah was not ruled by his flesh, is what this point was from. Paul writes this, Galatians 5, starting in verse 13. You were called to freedom, brethren. Only do not turn your freedom into an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word in the statement, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, take care that you're not consumed by one another. But I say walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. For the flesh sets its desire against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. For these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things that you please. But if you're led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. The deeds of the flesh are evident, which are immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, factions, envyings, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these, such as sleeping with Uriah's wife and then lying about it and having him killed. You see how David's living according to the flesh. Just as I forewarned you that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. There's quite a statement right there. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Now you look at those 7 things. Any one of those would have stopped David dead in his tracks when he was up on the roof that night. If he would have had love in his heart, he would have said, how in the world could I commit fornication, adultery with this woman, and still consider myself to be somebody who loves her? If I really love her, I'm going to want the best for her, and the best for her is not to sleep with me. The best for her is to have a relationship with her husband. How can I love Uriah and do this to him? The joy. Why does he think he has to have her? Does he not find joy in the Lord? If he finds joy in the Lord, if he's fulfilled being a servant of the Lord Most High, why would he think he's got to stoop to committing fornication with somebody else's wife?
Thinking, well, maybe she's not married, my attorney, but then he was told it's a person's wife. That's where he flip-flopped on the situation. He looked up on her first and has seen that she was beautiful, he desired her, and then he asked who she was.
Right.
That's the sin coming before petition there. I'm going to follow through with this, and that's where the seed was planted.
And the first answer to that question should have been, she's not mine, and I've already got wives and concubines. That ought to do it right there. So any one of those fruits of the Spirit would have stopped him, but that's not the direction he went.
Well, you got to also think it was her fault too, because I'm taking it back to the front of the kingdom.
Well,
How many times did she do that?
I don't know.
Every other day, or just when the king said.
So whether or not she incurred any guilt, David should have had the spiritual fortitude to say, If If you're walking down some dark alley some night and the most beautiful woman you've ever seen jumps out and offers herself to you and says she'll pay for the hotel room, well, hey, what are you going to do? Yeah, you're going to say no. You're going to say no, Don?
Jesus was crucified, he talks about these have the greater sin. So there are greater sins. And in this situation, I'm seeing David calling for her, a king, and she's got to go. Well, you know, at what point does she, now she could have said no, she could have, whatever the consequences were when she said no, yes. I mean, she bears sin, but a lot of situations, one or the other bears greater sin.
Yes.
You know, and typically, I do believe in a lot of different degrees of sin in situations.
At that time in history, the woman always bore the sin. The man, he was just there.
Well, but that wasn't God's plan.
Exactly.
That was,
God's plan and man's plan is usually 180 degrees.
that might have been a cultural thing, which it is today, especially in some Islamic cultures. Whatever happens to a woman, if she's attacked and raped by 50 guys, it's her fault. She might have been in the mosque at the time. It doesn't matter. So it's
Can't go in the mosque, it's men's.
okay. Well, this is a female mosque. It was Ladies' Day or Mom's Day in.
Romans chapter 8 goes it right along. It talks about the Spirit delivering us from the power of the flesh.
Yes.
Not according to flesh, but according to.
It's the same thing, but it's just parallel Romans 8 and Galatians 5. Right. Dayton?
Peter 4:1 and 2 summarize our study tonight in the fleshly passion side, David's part. He's got the loyalty to God on the other side. It's really a mental fight
Right.
with fleshly overtones and murder and all.
And those who are,
First Peter 4:1 and 2, Peter said, for as much sin as Christ suffered in the flesh, arm ye yourselves to be of the same mind. For he that is suffering in the flesh has ceased from sin, that you should no longer spend the rest of your time, the rest of our time, in the flesh, unto the will of God.
absolutely. And then he mentions those in the same context who would ridicule us because we don't go to do the same things of the flesh, which is where we are in the world today. So, well, Lord willing, we'll come back next week and we'll start on number 5. We'll finish number 4 and we'll go on to 5.